Hey, hello once again. This is Dre, the audio enthusiast. In case you guys are wondering why I'm putting out so many videos, well, today, well, not today, this month is my birthday month, December. And like I said, I bought a few things uh, that I want to do to certain setups I have in my house. So today I'm working on the second project, which is the two-channel stereo setup I have in my living room. And what I did was I bought an extra amp for that space. So that is what I'm going to attack right now is the setup of this new amp, or I should say adding another amp. It already has a Crown XLI 1500 amp already, and I'm going to add a second one. So I'm going to get into little details of what the setup is, and then we'll go on from there. So I always say, hang on and enjoy. It's home theater. It's your house. First off, we're going to look at what I have in that space right now. Right now, as the DAC, we have the FX Audio DAC X6 MkII is the current DAC that I'm using. I bought it about, I want to say 3, maybe 4 years ago. And just to talk about DACs, I know there's a lot of opinions from a wide variety of spaces and places when you talk about DACs. For those of you who may not be as in depth about what goes on with the DAC, why it does what it does, or how it does what it does, the one thing I'm going to tell you right now is just look at the specifications on a DAC and look to what chipset is using. This DAC here uses the ESS 9018 chipset. If you're not familiar with ESS, it goes by another common name of ES Saber. They were coming on strong about a decade ago when I think they struck a deal with Pioneer or a couple other Blu-ray players, and they were the main chip that were in a lot of Blu-ray players before they started moving over to the DAC side. And just to let you know the difference of this chip, the ES9018, the most current version out there now is the 9218, P as in Paul. So there goes the evolution of how soon this one I bought, like say 4 years ago, and you see the difference in the chip count. They've had about at least 3 or 4 different iterations since I bought this DAC back then. The second piece of equipment I have that goes with this setup is my old faithful Squeezebox Touch or Logitech Touch. Depends upon when you got into the ecosystem of Logitech or Squeezebox, I should say. I've had them since the Squeezebox Classic, which they referred to, used to be called the Squeezebox 3. Now they call it the Classic. I have owned the flagship model, the Transporter, which was an excellent device for its time, and it's still a audiophile rated device today. Now, the Touch itself is no slouch. The Touch comes with the AKM 4420 chipset. And some people even tried to use a add-on called an EDO mod to it to enhance that chipset. The current chipset for AKM is the 4449 or 99 EX chipset, the most current model. So these are the things you look for when you're buying stuff, whether it be an AVR or a DAC itself or anything that's going to reproduce music for you. Look to see what the chipset is. And I can tell you. Now, I just told you about the ESS and the AKMs. Now, from my experience, the ESS has a more revealing sound to it, more mid-range and upper end sound. The AKM are more of a, I would say, laid back sound to it. Pretty much, the AKM chipset would work great with a pair of clip speakers because it would take the harshness out of the tweeters or the clips. Now with the ESS, same speaker, the clips, it would probably most likely cause you to have ear fatigue after listening for a while, because now you have a much more revealing chipset in there and a very revealing speaker, to where it would give you ear fatigue because the highs would be so crisp and so sharp, it probably would just give you a little fatigue in that area. But some folks like that, others don't. I like a revealing sound, but I don't want it to be ear fatiguing. And we're going to touch on that also as we go on. Also, I have in that setup is the Teac model EQA 10-band equalizer. And I'll tell you in a minute why I have that in the setup. Now, the Crown app itself, this is what I plan on doing. It's the XLI 1500. By itself, it gives you 450 watts per channel at 4 ohms. It gives you 330 watts per channel at 8 ohms, which is really good, really good. Now, what I did was, by buying this second one, we're going to put it in bridge mode, mono mode, and we're going to run that, and that's going to give me 900 watts at 8 ohms in that setup. Okay. And this is the reason overall why I went with this setup. I'm using a pair of the Fluance signature tower speaker. Very nice tweeter. It has the fiberglass woven mid driver, and a pair of 8-inch woofers in it. Very large speaker cabinets themselves. For the price point, you really can't beat it. I mean, there are better made speakers out there by a long shot. But even right now, today, as the area of this video, I think they even dropped the price $100 more. So you can get a pair of these for $699. Regular price was going for the last year or so at $799. And I think the original retail price was somewhere around $899. So there you go. It's been their flagship speaker for the last 5-6 years. And I say it holds up on its own. But this is where you find out about what speakers work best, what power supply works best, and also learning about the chipsets in your DAC and whatever else you're using, even if it's a CD player, whatever. They're going to have certain chipsets in there to convert it from the digital signal to the analog signal, so we can hear the musical sound from it. Now, I'm 63 years old, been around, and not that I'm bragging or anything, but I think people of my age were born probably at the best time in audio history. And the reason why I say that, when I was born, vinyl was king, and it was being refined to be one of the best platforms to reproduce music. During the years that I've been alive, I've watched stuff go from vinyl to reel, and it's one of the things I learned that growing up, if you wanted to find out if somebody was in the military and you didn't want to ask them that, if they had a reel, pretty good chance they were in the military, because they bought it over in Japan or Korea or somewhere else overseas and brought it back to the States, because reel-to-reels were not a real big selling item here in the States. And then we moved on to 8-tracks. 8-tracks were a very convenient platform. I had one in my first car in the mid 70s and so forth. And then from 8-tracks, we went to cassettes. Same thing. Cassettes were a lot smaller than 8-tracks, and still held its own. Even the quality of cassettes got really good when they start adding chromium oxide to it. So you had a very good reproductive system. And then came along the digital era, starting with CDs, and now we're just straight into all different type of formats at MQA, DSD, FLAC, and Apple, whatever else digital media that you listen to. That is where we're at today. So I can say, being born between the late 50s, early 60s, like I was, up to today, we have seen more technological leaps and bounds in audio technology and the quality of that sound. Like I said, I grew up listening to the Motown sound, and it has a particular type of sound or how they recorded that music. And the same thing of transferring over to hearing people like Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, The Beatles, and other groups like that throughout the years. And you get into the beginning of the soft rock with Peter Frampton and Toto and other groups of that nature and stuff. But I would say the most consistent sound quality over the last, I would say, 50 years would be jazz. No matter if you're listening to Miles Davis or you're listening to Steely Dan. I consider Steely Dan a jazz group. Some people call them soft rock, whatever. I put them in a jazz category. I think whoever does the engineering when they're working with those type of people, those artists, I'm not just talking about those particular two, but those in the jazz genre, there's a consistency of how those people's CDs, their albums always sounded. We have seen a lot of, I would say, distortion from R&B, heavy metal, rap. Those genres were starting in the, I would say, the 80s with the invention of the kick drum. Really made engineers just kind of push the levels up and let it sound the way it came out. There was not a lot of technique, in my opinion, being used. So always leans towards a jazz listening session. When I do critical listening, that is the type of music I listen to, or I listen to some very ballad type R&B music. That is my preference for what I like to listen to. Now, getting back to this living room setup here, is that this is why I put together these different components to get the type of sound that I have. The room that it's in is a very large open space area. Like I said, this is when you're married, you got to find your spots and put it where you can. The room is probably something like 40 feet long, 20 something plus feet wide. And where the system setup is on one of the length of the walls, the long portion, which I would not ideally put it there, but that's the space I have to work with, which is next to a piano. I belong to my grandmother, and the piano's older than me. So what I've done is I have put these speakers on both sides of the piano, bring them about a foot from the wall, all the power supplies and everything else, cables, everything, sit behind the piano in a nice little area there. You'll get a picture of that. So knowing that the speakers I have here, the tweeters, I said they're the soft dome tweeters, puts out a nice smooth sound. The mid-range driver can be very revealing in the right circumstances with the right music. The woofers can overpower a small room if you start to turn it up and crank it kind of hard. So what I did was, what my thinking is that when I looked for this DAC a couple of years ago, I wanted a DAC to be a little more revealing to bring out that mid-range driver. So it would be more prominent in the vocal area. You know, people like Diane Krall, Nora Jones, male singers, Gregory Porter, Marvin Gaye type things. I wanted to hear those voices. So that's why I went for a DAC that had an ESS chipset in it. Okay. So going forward with that, then you're talking about the EQ I have in the loop of this. Because the room is so large, it also has a vaulted ceiling, so I have no lid, so the sound stays in a certain area, and also wood floors. All right, but under my wood floors, I do have sound dampening material under the wood floors, so I don't get so much reflective bounce, but it hits the floor and then levels out flatly across the floor. Like I said, the vaulted ceilings, plus behind the system is the stairs that go up to the upper part of the house. A lot of open space. So when I'm saying that, by using an EQ, I'm able to tailor the sound even more so that I don't have to turn it up too loud, but I can tailor it to where it still sounds good at low volumes, and I still hear, I say the mid range, and the bass is not overpowering and booming throughout the area. But when you have a large space, you have hard surfaces. Once again, there's no wall treatments in here or anything like that. That's when you can have bass sounds kind of like resonating throughout the whole room. All you hear is that boom, 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 boom sound. So that's what the purpose of me using an EQ on this setup is, be able to tailor the sound to fit the room. And this one thing I always preach about is the room that you're in will dictate more about what you should be buying and how you should be setting things up. You know, like the room I'm in now is a very small 10 by 10 office space. Basically, it was office space when we first bought the house. My sons, even when they got older, they lived in this room, so they got out of the house. Now I'm back in again 30 years later. So, like I say, this room here, very small. Bookshelf would work here, but I'm more of a tower type guy. So, like I said, I have the R50s in here now, Polk R50s with me, and they do very well, very well. But it's a small room. If I had these R50s out in that living room area, they would get lost. I would have to crank them up to get the decent type of sound that I get in this room to match the room out there, and then I probably would have to even tailor the EQ even more. So that's where we at. Now I already hooked the amp up. It's out there playing now, going through, make sure the connections are good and everything else. I bought some more cables that better suit the setup I have. But, a lot of times when you buy cables today, you buy RCA cables, they come together. Left and right are together. Well, running mono style like this on each amp, I need two separate cables. The cables to the speakers, 12 gauge. The cables running from the EQ to the amps, 12 gauge. I also have a linear power supply that goes to the Squeezebox, and then I haven't found another power supply for the DAC yet, but I will buy another linear power supply for the DAC when I find one. Right now it's using the standard wall wart, plug-in, and I would say that's about the weakest link I have. I have all of these things plugged into a Panamax power conditioner. So that also helps because I know that socket that sits behind the piano, it runs on the same circuit as the kitchen and the other side of the room that it goes to. And I've learned over the years, and this because like I said, I'm thinking I got a brand new house years ago, just bought this. I shouldn't have any electrical issues or stuff like that. But I learned a lesson because on circuitry, you got to figure out what circuits each part of your house is running on. So what was happening to mine is I was getting a hum feedback through the system when I first hooked it up years and years ago from when we used the microwave in the kitchen. It would cause a hum into that socket there, which would transfer into the speaker. So that's what caused me to get my very first power conditioner. Once I put that into place, the hum was gone. So don't worry about the microwave, my wife's mini coffee makers, the refrigerator, and everything else. We're good to go. So that's one thing I learned about 20 years ago about circuitry in a house, that sometimes you got to make sure you can isolate that circuit to your system so it doesn't get internal feedback, because all your stuff is susceptible to getting feedback from different gear that is close to or even on the same circuit that you may be on in your house. So this is what I have today. I'm sure I put a few clips in here for you guys to watch. Right now, I'm just letting it play just to make sure I didn't have any issues with it, but appreciate it. I got one more project, and that's going to happen next week. So like I always say, if you like what I'm doing, hey, give it a thumbs up. If you appreciate what I'm doing, go ahead and subscribe. I don't put out much content. So after next week on my last project, it might be another year. So I see you guys later. Bye.